It's a Twitter Tuesday on today's Locked On Giants podcast. Your questions, and we have a lot of them coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina, and today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you in part by On Location. On Location is the official hospitality partner of the NFL and is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. Visit On Location exp.com/SB56 for more information or search Super Bowl On Location. And before we jump into today's show, I first want to extend a heartfelt thanks to everybody who sent in condolences on the passing of my mom last Friday. I really appreciate all the messages, and I received literally hundreds of messages from my listeners here on YouTube, as well as on the platforms, as well as on Twitter. And I really, I usually like to respond to every message I can, but, between running around and everything, I just wasn't able to. But I wanted to take this moment to thank everybody who sent their condolences and their prayers. It is appreciated. Those of you who asked how I'm doing, I'm holding up right now as I record this. It is a Monday night, so I'm getting ready to answer your questions on Twitter Tuesday. What better way to cheer me up than to do your questions? Seriously, I love them. So yes, thank you again. And just a quick programming note. We have Twitter Tuesday today, as I mentioned. I'm not going to have time, unfortunately, to do a show on Wednesday because I have the wake and the funeral coming up. But there will be a show on Thursday. We'll do the crossover show with the Los Angeles Chargers podcast hosts. And then on Friday, I will do a show. And basically, for today's Twitter Tuesday, I have a lot of questions that came in from you guys and gals. So I probably am going to split them up into two shows, do some of them today and some of them on Friday's show, because I really got a lot of questions. And you know me, when you send your questions in, I do my best to get them on the show and I do my best to answer them. So I am going to do that today. So if you haven't gotten your question in and you thought of something when you're watching this show or listening to this show, you still have time, because again, I will do another mailbag on Friday to get to any questions I don't get to today. All right, folks, I want to start off with the questions that I received via email first. All right, so the first question comes from Pete M., who says, Patty, close your eyes for a moment and imagine it's 2022. Dave Gettleman has retired and bam, ownership hires you as the new GM. They profess no loyalty or preference to current players on the rosters nor any of the coaches. You have free reign with the checkbook up to whatever the cap will allow. What you going to do to turn this program around in 2022 and beyond? Oh my gosh. Wow. What a fun question to start off the program. Oh my goodness, Pete, I don't think the Giants would ever hire me to be their GM, but all right, I'll indulge you. All right. What would I do? I think obviously I would clean out the front office. I would start there, because getting rid of Dave Gettleman, whether it's firing him or having him retire, I think that's kind of like, you have a tree and you just clip off one branch, but you don't get rid of the trunk. So I would maybe look to revamp that entire front office. I would look to revamp, the director of personnel, the director of scouting. Now, I know people are going to say, well, what about Chris Mara? You can't fire Chris Mara. He's part owner of the team, but maybe look to, get everything more in alignment. I would obviously do an evaluation of the scouts, who's hitting, who's missing, and go from there. Maybe look at how the scouting process is taking place. So that would be the first thing I would do. But that obviously would be, you couldn't make any changes until after the draft because you're midway through the scouting process. All right. So up next, the coaching staff. I will admit that some of what Joe Judge has done this year, I don't like. I've gone on record as saying I didn't like how they prepped them for training camp. I do not like some of the in-game management decisions. I think Joe Judge has too big of a staff. And I suspect that with so many voices, there's just a lot of different opinions. And I am a firm believer of keeping things streamlined and, the old KISS theory, keep it simple, silly. I almost said stupid. So that I would maybe ask Judge to stay on, but to consider streamlining his coaching staff, because right now the in-game management decisions are horrible. And I don't know what process Judge has in place, but when you have so many voices in your head, that's not good. All right. So yeah, that would be the next thing I would do. I would give Joe Judge another year, by the way. Me personally as GM, I would not have a problem with that. If it were another GM, I might say, okay, maybe we need to rethink that. The other thing I would probably do with Joe Judge is I would sit him down and say, hey, Joe, and this is the reporter in me and the media person in me. I would sit him down and say, hey, Joe, stop insulting the intelligence of the fans and the media. Don't go up there and say, oh, we saw good things when the team just laid a big, stink bomb, like they did against Miami, like they did against Tampa Bay. Be honest with people. There's a way to be critical without singling out individuals. And I respect him for not saying, for example, oh, Will Hernandez had a bad game, or Nate Solder had a bad game, or Mike Lennon had a bad game. I respect that. But it's okay, last I checked, to say the offense needs to do better. We didn't score enough. We didn't move the ball enough. We turned the ball over too much. It's okay to say that. If you're going to say it to their faces, why not admit to it in public? To me, that's, I don't want to say hypocritical, but I just don't get that thinking. All right. So that would be another thing. Now, as far as players go, I'll be honest with you, Pete, I have not sat down and mapped out what I would do. I am going to do an article on that, which I will probably turn into a podcast. So I'd like to be able to look at the salary cap situation, which I don't have in front of me right now, in order to give you a more informed answer, a better researched answer. But suffice it to say, there's a bunch of guys on this roster right now that I would get rid of. And I'm also going to throw this out because I'm surprised nobody has mentioned it. I'm going to mention it now in the podcast here. There was a snippet that I happened to see in the New York Post in one of the articles that was written. Anyway, I saw a snippet that said in the Giants locker room after the Miami game, there were actually some guys who were sitting there laughing and joking around like they were, at a party. And when I read that, I thought to myself, my God, you got to be kidding me. Because anybody who was smiling and laughing and whatnot, I'd find out who those guys were and I would get them the heck off the team. Seriously, because if you're not upset, if you're not angry about that loss against the Miami Dolphins, then I'm sorry, you don't belong on this team. You don't belong on any team, because if you are a competitor and you are laughing and yucking it up after a loss, then go play checkers or something, because you are not a competitor. Just how I feel. All right. So anyway, Pete, hope that answers your question. I know I didn't go into players, but again, give me some time to do the proper research and due diligence on that. And I will have an answer for you. I will have an article for that, which I will probably turn into a podcast. So that is forthcoming. Thanks as always for the question, Pete, and hope to hear from you again next week. All right. The next question comes from Mark T. Mark, thank you for the very nice email you wrote me. I appreciate the kind words. Mark asks, he mentions that there has to be a lot of changes on the Giants to get them on track. He doesn't think it needs to be blown up, but the offensive side of the ball is really bad and is pulling the team down. And he can see it wearing on the defense. So the question is whether just changing the GM will fix the problems that the Giants are having, pairing a new GM with an existing coach, and does it make sense? You know what, Mark? I am of the opinion that if you're going to change the GM, you should probably just start over from scratch. That's the right way to do it. All right. The Giants have 9 draft picks this year. So you have a new GM come in, let him pick the head coach, let him pick a quarterback, and just start from scratch. This patchwork method isn't working. All right. I felt they should have done this when Tom Coughlin walked out the door, and they didn't. And I thought it was a mistake then. And it is a mistake that has trickled down to where we are now in 2021. Now, that said, what I think might happen is I could see team ownership who, remember, John Mara last year said he didn't want to give up quickly on Joe Judge. He wanted to give him time to grow into the role. I could see them hiring somebody, a GM, that maybe has connections to Joe Judge. And I think that would be a mistake because now you're limiting your net. I think, if the Giants do need a new GM, which I believe they will, don't limit yourself to people who have worked with Joe Judge in the past. Go outside, get the best available individual for the job. Don't have conditions. He's got to have worked with Judge in the past. He's got to have done this. He's got to have done. No, don't have conditions. Get the best individual, somebody who is good with personnel, somebody who has experience maybe with roster building, somebody who has cap savviness. All right. Don't worry about, lining the whole organization with Judge's buddies. I mean, Judge has his assistant coaching staff is filled with mostly his buddies. And, with all due respect to Judge, it's not working. All right. The coaching staff this year, to my thinking, has regressed. And I'm curious to see if Joe is going to fire any of those guys that he has connections with. All right. Mark Colombo didn't have a connection with, really, came from the Dallas tree. Jason Garrett, I think they were once removed from the Saban tree, but again, Garrett from the Dallas tree. Those are the only 2 coaches that have been fired by Judge. All right. Does he have the, I don't want to say the guts, but will he fire guys that he had connections with? Well, that remains to be seen. I think if he does that, that's going to show growth. And here's the other thing, while I'm on the topic of Joe Judge. All right. Number one, I like Joe. I think and want him to succeed. Okay. But Joe's got to break out of this. Well, this is how we did it in New England, or this is how we did it down in Alabama. You're not in New England anymore. You're not in Alabama anymore. Different programs, different rosters, different ways of doing things. You can't always rely on how you did things back in the day. Case in point, I write most of my articles for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, and they have a very different writing style, writing requirements than, say, The Athletic or Bleacher Report. All right. Just different types of rules. And I can't sit there and say, well, I liked how we did it at Bleacher Report. No, my editor's not going to put up with that. My editor's going to tell me, this is our style guide. This is how you do it for SI Fan Nation. All right. That's just how it goes. You move from one company to another. You do things according to how they do it. Do you make suggestions? Yes. But do you dig in and say, well, this is how we did it, in my other job? No employer is going to want to hear that. I'm sorry. I mean, I wouldn't want to hear that. If I hire a writer and that writer says, well, this is how I did it in my other job, I don't care. You're going to do it the way I want it done, So anyway, thank you for that question, Mark, and I hope to hear from you again. All right, up next, let me see. We have a question from Andy, who is an old Inside Football subscriber. Inside Football is a publication, a Giants-based publication, by the way, still in existence. And it is a publication where I got my start with the X's and O's. So if you want information on Inside Football, the website is shop.insidefootball.com if you want to check it out. All right. Anyway, Andy's question. Seems that most Giant reporters feel as though Judge will return. Would that be your decision, or is it simply because what you expect the Giants will do? Andy, I think that is what the Giants will do. Again, I go back to what John Mara said when Joe Judge was hired. And he said this time around, he knows that he probably should give the new head coach, Joe Judge at the time, more than just a couple of years. You cannot keep turning the head coach over, because every time you turn the coaching staff over, you are basically starting from scratch with a whole new staff, whole new philosophies. Now you've got to clean out the guys that don't fit the new guys, the new coach's expectations, bring in new guys. No. Here's the thing, Andy. The Giants next year do not have a lot of cap space. They're going to clear some guys out, which again, I'm going to write about, do an article about when things settle down and I have the time to do it. But at this point, find out what you have in Daniel Jones. He's under contract for next year. So I think they stick with him and they find out what they have in him and go from there. Give Judge another year. I think Judge signed a 4-year contract. Give him 3 years. If he can't turn it around, then I would rethink the direction I'm going in. Just my take on this. Now, what's also interesting, by the way, about Judge is on his original staff, he had a few guys who had head coaching experience who are no longer there, by the way. Jason Garrett was one. Brett Bielema was another. Okay, no longer there. So I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think there's another guy on the staff, and I can't remember who it is off the top of my head that might have been Dooley, Derek Dooley, who had head coach, and Freddie Kitchens. I can't forget Freddie Kitchens. All right, so 2 guys. But Kitchens, as we know, was kind of a one and done type of head coach. Dooley, I don't know his background off the top of my head as how successful he was as a head coach, but he certainly has that experience, but at the college level. So right now, what's interesting, and I don't know if this is why the coaching staff in general has regressed, but Judge doesn't really have a senior accomplished head coach in his ear right now. Again, Freddie Kitchens, I know he was with the Browns, had I think it was 1 year and he was gone. And Dooley, who coached at the college level. So Judge is kind of still finding his way. He's still a little wet behind the ears as a head coach. I think he's smart enough to get it and to learn. A little bit on the stubborn side, yes. But, look, give him another year. I say give him another year, even though I am of the opinion that if you're going to start over with a new GM, you should start from scratch. I don't think the Giants are going to do that. I just don't see it happening. And it's a shame because I think we're going to be stuck in this vicious cycle for a while until the Giants figure it out. But if you think about it, when they hired Tom Coughlin, they brought in Eli Manning. They had the same, GM. Ernie Accorsi was involved with that hiring process. But ideally, you want the coach and the quarterback to come in together. Joe and Daniel didn't come in together, but see if you can't make that relationship work. All right, because that's the one every day that's kind of out there in the spotlight. So hope that answers your question. As always, thank you. All right, one more email question before we go to the Twitter questions. This one is from Matt L, and he writes, let's see. What influence do you feel that Coach Judge will have in determining who is hired as the next GM? And will he have final say on who his coaching staff will be? All right. Second answer to your second question, Matt, is yes, Judge will have final say on his coaching staff. You can't really force guys on him. And I know a lot of people say, well, Jason Garrett was forced on him. At the end of the day, Judge made the decision, but you also have to remember At the time, he was a brand new head coach. His boss, the man who signed his paychecks, recommended Garrett. When you're in that position, are you really going to say no to the guy who signed your paycheck? I don't think so. You're going to try and make the marriage work, so to speak. Joe tried. It didn't work. Onward and upward. All right. And as far as your question about will Judge have any say in determining who was hired as the next GM, I do think a smidge, because remember, Judge has to work with the GM. They have to be on the same page. They have to be able to communicate with one another. Judge has to be able to say, I need this type of player at this position to be competitive. And the GM needs to be able to say, okay, here are your options. Here are the guys that I can get at within reason for price or in the draft or whatever. So there has to be a collaborative working relationship. Now, that said, the next GM doesn't need to be a rubber stamp guy, which is what I feared Dave Gettleman turned into. In other words, don't just sit there and take an order like you're in a restaurant and you're, a waiter in a restaurant. Okay, give me a 6'4" defensive end, 260 pounds, who can do A, B, C, and D and has this type of build, blah, blah, blah. When in fact, maybe Dave is saying, okay, you know what? I know a guy who fits that bill, but there's this other guy who I think has a little bit more talent and who might be a better long-term investment. All right, that's what you need in the GM. There has to be a collaborative relationship, and there has to be a checks and balances type of relationship between the GM and the head coach. So let's hope that that's what the Giants find when they get to that point. If again, Dave Gettleman decides to retire after this season. All right, Giant fans, that should do it for our email questions. Let me just double check here. Yep, that's all our email questions. Coming up, we're going to do some of the Twitter questions. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast, a Twitter Tuesday. But first, I'd like to think that the reason why you listen to the Locked On Giants podcast is for the power of knowledge. So why not switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money? Because with Boost, you get the power of a free 5G phone and 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line, which includes access to one of America's largest 5G networks, which is the fastest network available. Now, with all that money you'll save and all that knowledge you'll gain, just how powerful will you become? Find out today. Switch to Boost Mobile, and for a limited time only, get that free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. Again, visit boostmobile.com to find out how you can start saving. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that website is boostmobile.com. All right, Giant fans, we have more coming up on today's Locked On Giants podcast. But first, Super Bowl 56 at Los Angeles' SoFi Stadium is less than 100 days away. And On Location, the official hospitality partner of the NFL, is the only place to score a once-in-a-lifetime Super Bowl ticket and experience package. You can select your exact seats and choose from elite experiences featuring an exclusive pregame celebration with NFL legends, 5-star Los Angeles hotels, and food prepared by the great Wolfgang Puck. Visit onlocationexp.com/SB56 for more information, or search Super Bowl On Location. Again, that's onlocationexp.com/SB56, or search Super Bowl On Location. The Super Bowl will be here before you know it, so plan on getting there with On Location. All right, welcome back, Giant fans, to a Twitter Tuesday. Patricia Traina here with you on the Locked On Giants podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day, or if you're watching us on YouTube, your first watch of the day. And speaking of YouTube, last I checked, the subscriber count was at 954 subscribers. All I want for Christmas is to get to 1,000. Please help me make it happen. If you are watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. Click that little bell, like my channel, tell your Giant fan friends to check us out. Help me get to 1,000. It's all I want for Christmas, really. It's that and good health for everybody. Okay, 2 things I want for Christmas. It's all good, right? Okay, we are on a Twitter Tuesday. And again, if I don't answer your question on today's show, because I did get a lot of questions, I am going to do another mailbag on Friday. So please do not get offended. I will get your questions in either today or I will get them in on Friday. If you tag them Ask P Train, I will find them and they will get on the show. So, all right, let's get to the Twitter questions. All right, we're going to kick this one off with G-Man Mike 11. Longtime follower on Twitter who asks, should John Mara be forced to remove himself from all football-related decisions? And should someone like George Young be hired with total football autonomy? Okay, Mike, John Mara is the team owner. You cannot force his removal from anything. If he wants to be involved in something, that is his right as co-owner of that team, just as it is Stephen Tisch's right as co-owner of the team to be involved. All right. Now, that said, I think what you are probably doing here is you're probably thinking that John Mara has his hand in the football pot, so to speak, a little more than is actually true. John Mara is basically hands off, believe it or not. I know that's hard to believe. I know people are frustrated, but he is hands off. And the Maras have been hands off going back to the days of George Young, when George Young was hired in 1979 on the condition that he have full and final football authority. All right. That is how it's been ever since. All right. Now, should someone like George Young be hired? Absolutely. I mean, if they could find another George Young who is, a good talent evaluator, who can manage the salary cap, why wouldn't you want somebody like that? I mean, George Young finally got into the Hall of Fame. But if you're talking George Young towards the end of his career, when he kind of, the game kind of passed him by a little bit and he had trouble with the salary cap, you probably don't want that version of George Young, but you do want the guy who built championship teams, playoff bound teams in the 1980s, who had successes with his drafting. But you want somebody who can also navigate free agency and the like. So I would be totally down with it if the Giants hired somebody like that. Should Dave Gettleman call it quits, or, should the Giants and Gettleman, part ways? So thanks for that question. Lenny De La Cruz 7 is up next, and he has a question about Nick Gates. Was a Nick Gates leg badly broken, and so much so that he may never come back? Also, do we need to think about replacing him? I don't know the full extent of Nick Gates's injury. I do know that he had a compound fracture. I believe it was a spiral fracture, which was similar to what Rich Seibert had years ago. And I'll tell you this, Lenny, when Rich Seibert had his injury, which again was a spiral fracture, and the man needed surgery after surgery after surgery, I didn't think Rich Seibert was going to come back. I thought his career was over. And of course, he came back and he played well. He was on a Super Bowl championship team. I mean, the guy was a warrior. And I learned my lesson back then, never to count out a warrior. Well, you know what? Nick Gates is a warrior. All right. I am not counting him out and saying that his career is done. No. Now, will he be ready for next year? I don't know. I would not be surprised if he isn't. So that said, do the Giants need to add at the center position? Absolutely, because I don't think Billy Price is the answer. So yeah, I would add another center, regardless of what happens with Gates, because you need that depth. And again, Billy Price, once he snaps the ball fine, but after that, things kind of go downhill. So I would get another center. Thanks for that question. Roman Whoops says or asks, why hasn't Gettleman been fired yet? What's the point, Roman? I mean, come on. You fire him now. At this point, what the GM's doing is pretty much, initiating the roster moves from the practice squad elevations, approving guys that are signed off the street that may or may not be here. Why not wait until after the season when teams are out of the playoffs and you have a wider net? Right now, you have a limited net. All right. So that's kind of why I think, the situation hasn't gotten to the point where, I think the Maras and the Tishes want to pull an in-season firing. With Jerry Reese, that whole Eli thing kind of forced the hand, I think. And that's why Jerry and Ben McAdoo were fired in season. I don't think you have the same situation quite with Dave Gettleman. I get it. The roster's a mess. The salary cap next year is a mess. I get all that, but they're going to wait. They're going to wait, and what's going to happen is Gettleman is going to announce his retirement. That's my guess. All right. So sit tight. We only have 5 more weeks of the season to go. It'll be here before you know it. Trust me. All right. Up next, we hear from John Spielman, who asks, going forward in 2022, what changes that are not obvious would you make to the organization? And we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Well, John, I kind of answered that before, but yeah, I would look at it from top to bottom. I mean, not obvious. Look, to me, some of the people in the front office, I think, have been around for an awfully long time. I'm thinking, Kevin Abrams has been the salary cap manager for a long time. And, Abrams, for the most part, has done a good job with managing the cap. But if you're going to bring in a new GM, I think maybe you might want to bring in a guy who works well with that GM, with the salary cap. In other words, like I said before, you don't want to just, you have a branch or a tree, and you don't want to just, sever one of the branches. You want to get rid of the whole tree. You want to uproot the whole tree and start from scratch. And I think with that, I would look to maybe, move on from Kevin Abrams. I know the Giants have been increasing his responsibilities. He's had the title assistant GM for God knows how long. I don't want to see him as the next GM. It's nothing personal. I want a guy in here who is more modern in his approach, and just, I don't want the old regime. Sweep it out. If you're not going to sweep out the entire operation, at least, clean out the front office and get in new blood across the board. Don't just promote a Gettleman lieutenant. Makes no sense to me, but we'll see what the Giants do. They do like stability. Quite frankly, I don't think there's anything stable about the franchise right now with how they've been performing, but that's not my call to make. So, all right. Next question comes from Angry G-Man Fan, who wants to know, let's see, realistically, at this point, everything except the front office has turned over, i.e. Mara and Tish, since the last Super Bowl. Yet year after year, it's the same result. Is there any semblance of an idea as to how this team turns around? Yeah, quite frankly, number one, don't spend big bucks on free agency, and especially on guys who have injury histories. It's interesting. I look at what Dave Gettleman did in free agency this year. I look at some of the personnel moves he made, and he basically went against everything he preached was at the core of successful roster building. For example, injured guys are going to get injured. Okay, so what does he do? He goes and he signs Kenny Golladay, who had an injury history, Kyle Rudolph, who had injuries, who else? Adoree Jackson, who had injuries, John Ross, who had injuries. All right. And guess what? They've all missed time. All right. So injured guys are going to get injured. They brought back Evan Ingram with the injury history. I mean, I could go on and on. So that was one thing. The other thing, building up the pit. All right, building up the trenches. They built up the defensive line. The defensive line is fine. Where were the resources for the offensive line? Even if the Giants truly believe that they had everything they needed for that offensive line, given that there are injuries, given that guys were on the final year of their contract, Will Hernandez and Nate Solder, why would you not have young talent in the pipeline being developed as we speak to replace those guys eventually? That went against what Dave has preached. All right. I could go on and on, run the ball. I know everybody's going to debate the Saquon Barkley thing, but you can't necessarily have predicted the injuries. But still, Saquon Barkley, you did know that he was going to be a feast or famine type of runner based on what he did in college. And Barkley, I still say, was added to help Eli Manning more so than the next round of the next generation of quarterback. Because the biggest mistake of all that the Giants have made, and I will go down in history as saying this, is that before they drafted their franchise quarterback, they did not prepare properly for him. They didn't have an offensive line. They didn't have playmakers in place. And they had to scramble. And as a result, they had coaching changes. And they just totally botched this up. And there's no excuse for that. And I'm surprised that happened. All right. But it's in the books. So here we are. All right. One more from Angry G-Man fan who wants to know, what benefit is there to this facade the team puts up in the media, and why can't they be honest and call out the issues? I'm with you on this. And I said this, I think, before. If I'm advising Joe Judge, and Joe's not going to ask my opinion, but as a media person, and I like to think I consider myself to be fair, all right, without an agenda, without, putting favorites on anybody or anything like that. But if I were advising Joe, I'd say, look, Joe, don't insult people's intelligence. All right. It's okay to say we as an offense didn't perform against the Dolphins. We couldn't get anything done. We need to run the ball better. We need to catch the ball better. We need to coach better. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not singling out an individual. It's not like you're singling out, Will Hernandez or Saquon Barkley or Mike Lennon or any of those guys. There has to be a happy medium. You can't just get up there and say, well, I saw good things. Okay. Did you see dead people too? Because you were the only one, But seriously, I agree with you. And I found that to be disturbing. I know that's how Joe is. Joe has said time and again, look, I will protect the franchise. Okay, fine. I get it. I also understand the thinking behind not calling somebody out. I know I would not want my boss to call me out in public. All right. If I do something wrong, I'd rather my boss say, all right, hey, Locked On hosts, we need you not to do this, instead of, calling me out individually if I was the guilty party. All right. So I get that. But there's a way to get your message across and to appease your paying customers, AKA the fans, yourself, that, yeah, I recognize there's a problem. I'm aware there's a problem, and I'm aware that something has to be done. So I am totally with you regarding this. All right. So thanks for that question. Okay. We have a few more here in this segment. Let's go with Luis, 602-6470. Do you think the Giants would make a push for Jordan Davis from Georgia? Luis, right there, I got to stop you. I haven't looked at the draft yet. I will look at the draft later this month as the season winds down. So right now, I don't know who's who in the draft. I've got to admit. Zach Dietz over at Giants Country, who does draft stuff for me, I would suggest maybe checking out the draft section, because Zach Dietz puts up some great articles over there on giantscountry.com. Rick Saratella of NFL Draft Bible just posted an article over on Giants Country about 5 Senior Bowl prospects the Giants might want to take a look at. So if you're looking for some draft material, that's what I would do right now until I get up to speed on guys. And I will. In the past, I used to wait till April. Now I start in December. So give me a chance to get caught up there. All right, Steve 10 G-Men. How do you feel? How do you fill the offensive line holes next year? Give draft picks used for offensive line and or current players. Steve, I think it's got to be a combination. I mean, Andrew Thomas is a keeper. I think we can all agree on that. I would like to see more of Matt Parrott, to be honest with you. I mean, attitude or whatnot aside, Nate Solder's not your future. So just burying Matt Parrott on the bench, to me, is being short-sighted. I do think the Giants will try to sign some guys, maybe, some veteran guys for depth, but I would go heavy in the draft on offensive linemen. Get young talent in the pipeline, because right now they don't have a whole lot of it. And that's the same mistake Jerry Reese made. And Dave Gettleman, I'm afraid, has repeated that mistake. Okay, the next question, actually a statement, I guess, from Caridi Tom. You need to ask the tough questions about his introductory press conference, saying he'd be aggressive on offense. Tom, we've been asking the questions. Go back and look at the transcripts. Everybody in the media has asked about it, about why certain decisions are made. We do ask the questions, all right? He doesn't give satisfactory answers. That's not on us. That's on him. But the questions are getting asked. All right. And then one more for this segment, True Story 7. I actually believe Joe Judge has the potential to be a good one. With that said, he hasn't been given a good hand to gamble with. Not his quarterback, worst offensive line, etc. Would you agree to keep him, get a GM to collaborate with him, prioritize O-line in this draft, and Bryce Young? Okay, several questions in that tweet. So Bryce Young, again, I haven't done any draft work yet, so I can't answer that. I think he's a quarterback. I'm not sure, but quarterbacks, from what I understand, this is not a strong class of quarterbacks. So I think I might stay with Daniel Jones as my quarterback next year. Regarding Judge, look, I've said it before. I like the man. I think he has the direction and the vision to be a good one. Has he been dealt a bad hand? Yes, but you know what? Good coaches find a way around it. Now, injuries, they've been out of control. I agree with that. But the Giants are not the most injured team in the NFL. All right, two teams that are in playoff consideration, the Ravens and the Titans, beat them in that category. So you have to figure out ways to overcome your injuries. And that starts with depth. If you don't have solid depth, then you're not going to be able to overcome it. Let's see. Worst offensive line. That's, again, front office. Zero cap space. That's front office. Look, Joe Judge, yes, he's been dealt a bad hand, but his in-game management has stunk this year. Some of the decisions he's made have stunk. All right. And I could go down and make a list for you, and I've said this, and I'm probably repeating myself now, but I didn't agree with how he prepped everybody for the, regular season. All right. I don't agree with this baloney of burying young guys on the depth chart because they land in the doghouse for whatever reason. All right. I don't agree with, sitting there and singing Kumbaya, everything's fine, remain calm, everything's fine. That famous scene from Animal House. I don't agree with that. There's a lot of things I don't agree with. All right. Joe's not perfect. And I think Joe will be the first one to admit he's not perfect. So that said, I do think he has an idea of where he wants to go with this team. But look, you could say, well, get him better talent. Didn't we all rejoice last offseason when they signed Kenny Golladay and Adoree Jackson and all the signings they were doing? I seem to remember a lot of people being excited about that. Nobody anticipated injuries, all right? Nobody anticipated that the coaching staff would regress a little bit, or that Jason Garrett would end up fired, or that, the defense would start off slowly. There was a lot to overcome. And, they did the best they could. It didn't work out. They're on their way to their fourth or fifth straight season with double-digit losses. As we used to say when I played softball, we'll get them next year, guys or gals. We had girls on our team, obviously, so we'll get them next year, girls. All right. Anyway, thanks for that question. All right, folks, I need to take a break. When we come back, I'll do a few more of your questions. I'm trying to get as many in on this show. So show's running a little long, but I hope you're enjoying it all the same. So we'll be right back after this. All right, Giant fans, more coming up on today's Twitter Tuesday. But first, in life, we're bound for different things. And with beachbound.com vacations, you could be bound for adventure, for passion, discovery, rejuvenation, or the unexpected. Whatever type of beachbound experience you want to be bound for, you're sure to find it at beachbound.com. Beachbound.com offers the perfect beach vacation featuring all-inclusive packages at competitive rates. So what are you bound for? Well, find out today. Head on over to beachbound.com and find your perfect beachbound vacation. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. Patricia Traina here with you on this Twitter Tuesday. And I am really trying to get as many of your questions in as possible. If I don't get a question in that you send in, I'll try and pick it up on Friday. And also, you probably noticed I haven't been flashing the questions on the screen because there's a lot of them. And I am, unfortunately, a little short on time to do all the post-production work that I normally do this, because in case you missed the news, my mom did pass, and I'm kind of trying to squeeze in my work in between running around and doing stuff and whatnot. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to do the polished production that I usually try to give you on Twitter Tuesday. I apologize for that. Hope you are still enjoying the program all the same. And once things settle down, I will go back to doing it the right way. So anyway, let's get through a few more Twitter questions. Again, we have a bunch here. All right, we're going to start off with Greg Pear. One, why was Mike Lennon brought in? Did they really feel he was an upgrade from Colt McCoy? All right, Greg, the reason why Mike Lennon was brought in is because he had a stronger arm. And the thinking was that the Giants were going to go with a more vertical concept with Jason Garrett, something they weren't able to do last year. But the reason why they weren't able to do it last year is because they didn't have deep speed. So they added deep speed, and the thought process was more verticals. Let's get a guy in here with stronger arms, and we'll sacrifice the mobility. Well, we know how that worked out. So I don't know if you could say that Glennon was an upgrade over Colt McCoy, but what's done is done. Can't get Colt McCoy back, unfortunately. But P.S. I can't help but wonder if maybe Colt McCoy might have won that game against the Dolphins. We'll never know, but anyway. All right, let's see. Luis 160-26470. What are the chances we see David Sills get an opportunity to play against the Chargers? I don't see it, Luis. If they were going to bring him up, they probably would have brought him up quite some time ago. I think, they've got other guys they've got to bring up, and there's only so many passes to go around. So, Ogaiego at Twitter. Thoughts and ranks on Brian DeBoll, Buffalo, Hackett, Green Bay, McDaniel, San Francisco, and a future New York Giants head coach. I'll be honest with you. I don't know a lot about McDaniel, and if McDaniel is actually operating independently, or is he carrying out with what Kyle Shanahan wants. Brian Daboll, I like him, always have. Intriguing. Hackett, Hackett, I guess if you have Aaron Rodgers, anybody could look good. I mean, I could probably look good calling plays if I had Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know. But as a potential head coach, if I had to pick one of those three, I might go with the Buffalo's DeBoll. So, all right, let's see. Now, some of the questions I think here are starting to repeat. The soccer, John asked about Judge's future. And I've said before that I think Judge is going to get another season. Let's see. Danny K 731 wants to know, can someone explain why we consistently snap the ball but no time on the play clock? Is the play not getting in on time? And is there advantage for the D line to get a jump on the snap? Yeah, you know what? There could be. It's interesting, Danny, because I think Eli Manning used to do that a lot too. I don't know what the advantage is other than if you're trying to control the clock and keep the other offense off the field. That I could see as being an advantage, but you got to have everybody lined up. That's the bottom line at the end of the day. And the Giants just haven't been able to do that consistently. All right, up next, Wally Joe 666, thoughts on Saints letting Sean Payton out of the final 2 years of his deal, possible compensation. No, Wally, I don't want to go there. Come on. They need the draft picks, the Giants. I don't want to trade for a head coach. So let's not go there. I'm sorry. I know you like Sean Payton, but you need the draft picks. You need players. It doesn't matter if Vince Lombardi comes back from the dead to coach this team, or Tom Landry comes back from the dead, or any great head coach. You need the draft picks. So let's not go there. Shonery, any chance Chris Mara is fired? Nope, he's a team owner, not going anywhere unless he chooses to. And then another question from Con Shonery, can you name any GM and head coach candidates? Not at this point, no, because I haven't done the research. I will look at GM candidates towards the end of the season. All right, I need to do the research. And right now, I've got my hands full with keeping up with the day-to-day stuff with this team. So we'll get there. Trust me, I've got a lot of stuff that I want to look at, from the salary cap to which players should go, which players they should target. I've got all that on my to-do list, and I will get to that point. So just bear with me. Let's see. X McDaniels asked about firing Gettleman now to start the house cleaning. I think I answered that question already. Shake and Bake wants to know, what's the feeling around the building about Judge's job security? And I think most fans are at the point where we want a complete overhaul. All right. I've sort of answered that question as well. I think Judge gets another year. All right. He's got a 4-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think they're going to fire him. Will they maybe ask for some changes? Perhaps, but I don't think they're going to fire him. I think he'll get another year. And then let's see, we have one more question. This is from @Giants7227. What is it about this team that they just can't find their way back? Our owners have a huge part in this. It's beyond ridiculous what they have done to this team. Wish we could fire the owners. Well, you can't. So, you can sit there and gripe about the owners all you want. You can't fire them. They are who they are, and they're here to stay until such time they decide to sell. So to sit there and whine and moan about it, to me, is just wasted energy. That said, why can't this team find their way back? Because of a combination of things. Number one, I think they over-evaluate the talent they have. This I don't want to say policy, that's not the right word, but this practice that I've noticed with this team. For example, look at some of the veteran players that have come in and the ties that they have to Joe Judge. Joe Judge has gone for his guys, all right? The Nate Solders, the Keon Crossons, the Nate Ebners. You're going to sit there and tell me that Nate Ebner was a better choice than Michael Thomas? I'm not going to buy that. So I just feel that sometimes when a coach comes in and he sticks with what he knows and he doesn't kind of expand a little bit, he puts himself in danger of collapsing into himself. And the same can hold true with, if you notice some of the draft picks and the players that they acquire, a lot of Georgia people on that team. Under Coughlin, you had a lot of BC and Syracuse guys. There are other schools besides Georgia that you can tap into, and Alabama that you can tap into. And to me, when you keep going back to the same well, that's lazy. And that drives me nuts about this franchise. And that's something that if I could change, I would change. All right. There's too much relying on what you know. And while that provides a sense of security, that's not always a good thing. So that's my feeling on that. All right. I know I answered all the questions in response to my December 6th tweet. So that said, I think I'm going to wrap this up now. If I didn't, and I'll go back and I'll look and see if there were any questions I missed. If I did miss them, I will try to pull them in on Friday. So if you still want to get a question in, send them to me and I will get them in on Friday. And, we'll just keep doing it because your questions are important to me. So anyway, thank you again, Giant fans, for the great questions. This was a lot of fun for me, very therapeutic. Appreciate you. And thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. So yeah, keep those cards and letters coming. Thank you for the kind words. We will see you not tomorrow. Tomorrow, unfortunately, I won't have a show for you because I do have to lay my mom to rest, but we'll be back Thursday with the crossover show and then on Friday. So until then, everybody catch you later on this week.